Hey everybody, welcome to Colin Podcasting About Real Estate. This is show number 25. My guest today is Nathan Brooks. He's the co-founder and CEO of Turnkey Investments. It's a Kansas City-based company that renovates and sells more than 150 turnkey properties per year. He's got more than a decade of experience in real estate investing. He's a sought-after speaker, writer, real estate coach. He's recently moved into new construction. Ton of interesting things to say. Nathan's really highly regarded in real estate circles, and fans of the Biggerpockets Podcast, which is the biggest real estate show in the world, will probably recognize him as he's been on the show a record 4 times. And Nathan and I had a really cool conversation which covered his hustle and his entrepreneurship from a very young age, the huge personal price he paid by picking the wrong real estate partner, how he designed and scaled a business afterwards and thrived, the steps he takes to define his core values and the core values of his business, and hiring the right kinds of people with the right personality types for each role. It was really interesting. His tips for dealing with wholesalers, his tips for defining your buy box. He talks about why cash flow is only one thing to look at while analyzing rentals. Some interesting insights there. We talk about the mistakes he sees newbies making, and more importantly, how you and others can avoid them. And we also talk about how COVID disrupted, get this, his MMA cage fighting. Don't get many guests that are MMA fighters. And we talked about a lot more besides. He's a very thoughtful guy, very introspective guy, and he's got a lot of wisdom. And I think you're going to enjoy the show. And just before we head over to Nathan, I want to remind everybody about my website, of course, colininvestments.com, COLIN investments.com. You can go there to check out all the previous podcasts, a bunch of videos I've put up. There's a bunch of real estate reports you can download for free. You can also schedule a call with me if you want to have a quick chat or a longer chat about your real estate journey. There's some options there. So check out the website. I'm also looking at setting up some foreclosure auction training soon. If that's something you're keen to learn more about, just reach out to me by email or social media, and you'll find all those links on my website, colininvestments.com. But that's enough from me, guys. Let's head on over and chat to Nathan Brooks. Nathan Brooks, how are you? Welcome to the show.
Colin, I'm still good, my friend. I appreciate you having me on, man.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. And I'm delighted to get you on. I know you're a busy guy and you've been on a ton of podcasts, and you're a pretty prolific guy. You got a lot of stuff going on, most of it related to real estate. But kind of before we get to all the cool stuff you're doing now, Nathan, and with your team, can you bring us back to the very start of your entrepreneurial journey and talk to us about how it all began?
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's funny you mentioned the start of the entrepreneurial journey. I think, I was one of those early on, like elementary school, who, just kind of beat to my own drum and wanted to be in charge, and I was a loud mouth, never had a trouble, talking, but had trouble talking too much. And I remember even like in elementary school, going to job sites and bartering for, pieces of wood and building this shed thing under my parents', house. And so, I think I always had a passion for like problem solving and putting things together. But for, kind of fast forwarding multiple decades, I played music professionally for, a decade or so in between my high school years and college and past that. And so,
That's awesome. What kind of music did you play? Was it a rock band? What were you doing?
Yeah, both in the secular and sacred world. So I actually spent a number of years as one of the amazing worship leaders on a staff of the largest United Methodist Church in the U.S., which is actually here in Kansas City, where I'm local, and also of course the rock and roll and playing a bar and till 2 a.m. and getting after it. So yeah, it was a lot of fun doing that.
So what about when you were in kind of high school or college? What did you do to earn money during those years when you were kind of 18, 19, 20? What kind of hustle were you up to?
I worked all kinds of crappy jobs. I also had a landscaping company. I, worked for some other people. I ran a bar in college, created Martini Night. I was always thinking like, how are ways we can do this? And so I like creative stuff, thinking about stuff. And that's what I think I love about, being in business so much too, is that opportunity to be creative, but also recognizing that creativity can sometimes be destructive too, if you're not putting it in along with the process and those sort of things. But,
Yeah.
worked at Godfather's Pizza, worked at Best Buy. Um, I just worked so many of those crappy jobs.
It sounds like you worked more than enough jobs to realize that it was worth putting in the effort to do your own thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also the desire to be my own boss in a way that was far beyond just like having having a job or whatever, is like literally I have this passion to do and create, and how can I create a life around how I want to live, and getting better and better about that. And I think that's one problem. And then the other problem is, what does the leadership of that thing look like? And then how do you, end up with the end result that you really want in it, which is, that business and that, income, lifestyle, yada, yada, yada.
It sounds like you could have gone on to do any number of different business types with that kind of attitude. What was it that drew you to real estate and kept you in real estate?
I was kind of eyeballing it as something that I thought
Hmm.
looked interesting, and I was literally sitting at a restaurant that's not even in business anymore. Years and years and years ago, and
Hmm.
overheard a guy talking about flipping houses, and I'm like, bingo, I'm in. And I went literally over and talked to this guy, and multiple weeks later, we're like in business. We're
Oh
business
wow, that was
partners.
quick. And give us some
Oh,
context. What year was this? What whereabouts in the cycle were we?
I think it was in a range of 2006,
Okay, so kind of
2007.
at where things were getting, that was, yeah, that was a boom, all over the
It was
world
a
back
boom.
then, well before the great, about 2 years before the Great Recession. And so you met a guy who talked about flipping, and you kind of went into business a few coffees later.
Yeah, it was a total disaster.
Oh
Total,
no.
total, total disaster. But he, it's not. There's a lot of details that are not worth reliving for my sanity more than anything. But
Sure.
it definitely sparked the additional interest to understand more about real estate. And
Hmm.
so, the first year I'd done, probably still 12, 13, 14 houses, something like that. And so kind of,
Pretty good start.
yeah, I mean, buying them is the easy part. I think sometimes people try to, they make, one of my lines to my team now is, don't make money the problem, make the problem your problem. And so, even in that situation is like, well, I'll figure it out. Right. But also through that lesson in years of operating and doing, really wasn't probably millions of dollars of real estate, and still not recognizing some raging gaps that I had in my own abilities or leadership or things that are kind of in
Can you
that.
give us an example? Because obviously you're clearly buying and selling houses and presumably making money on most of them, like a lot of people were back in those days when prices were going up 15, 18% a year. I mean, that can cover a lot of deficiencies, I guess. So what kind of stuff did you think you were missing out on that you'd know about now?
Sure. Well, I think it's less about the money, although it's a portion of it, but it's also
Mm.
like doing something that you're good at or not good at. And so, it's anything, literally anything with details, Colin, like, anything in a project management scenario. It's like, it's a difference between a personality of someone who is detail and said, okay, great, Colin, let's look at all of, here's 123 Main Street, and here's the budget and the scope, and here's what we're planning on spending, and this is the timeline, and these are all the subs, and this is how we're doing it. And my version, which is, great, Colin, we bought the house, it was this price, this is what we're going to put to it, they'll be done this day, that's what they said, and call me when it's done. you know
Yeah.
and and then having the follow through and of that detail. And I think, one of the books that talks a lot about this is Traction and Rocket Fuel by
Hmm.
Gino Wickman, and talking about how that visionary, which is a much cooler title, by the way, than visionary, than the integrator, which is responsible for all those details, but no less important by any means. And you know utilizing that ability and understanding to have somebody who both is saying, hey, here's how we can put this house together, and also here's a person who's saying, great, we're going to follow this process and run the house and get it to the end line. So
Yeah.
big difference between doing 12 in a year, and this year we'll do like 141 houses, was what we're on pace to do, and it's a totally different animal, right?
Totally. Night and day. I remember doing 15 houses a year and 100 houses a year. And you're right. You do need that visionary. You do need the integrator. You do need a ton of stuff. And people forget how many little decisions are involved in renovating a house. I mean, you just decide, oh, it needs a new kitchen. Well, there's about 50 things that you need for a new kitchen, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, there
and
are. And then how do you systematize that in a way that, as you do grow and scale, that, you can't be in there making all those decisions, at least not in, have your sanity and everybody else that you're asking to work with you too. So,
yeah,
we spent a lot of time on, and there's a great book right now that I am obsessed about, called Who Not How, Dan Sullivan. And,
who not how. Okay.
it's killer. And so I keep asking my team, like, all right, you put yourself in the how right now, but are you the who that should be solving this? Right.
Right.
Are you the person that should be in the middle of, circling the wagons again, or are you empowering somebody on your team in that department that is supposed to be solving it? And so I'm obsessed about this question right now.
It's funny because you're right. You learn all these things as you scale up. And I feel jealous a lot of the time for people that got started in real estate in 2010 because they literally had 9 years to figure all this stuff out while the market was going in their way. And they were swimming with the tide, and it was a lot easier to do it. And back in the 2006-7, I was making money in an Irish office selling real estate in Eastern Europe and Central and South America to all these Irish and British investors, and traveling around the world, and thought I was fantastic, jet-setting 26-year-old. But then the Great
Sounds
Recession
pretty
hit.
cool.
It was pretty cool until the Great Recession hit, which was an almighty kick in the nuts. And then you're like, oh my God, now I'm firing people and closing offices and trying to scrape deals together from a kitchen table. And it humbles you pretty quickly. And like you, I had like a 2 or 3 year run before the wall kind of hit me on the nose. I mean, how did that, how did you find out? You got started in 2006. Did you hit that wall as well and then have to kind of start over again with a new business?
I did. Yeah, absolutely. It was awful. Went through bankruptcy, and there's a lot of things that I could have done differently. And I've been on numerous podcasts talking about that, so I'm not sure how much we really want to do that.
No, we don't need to drill into too much, but it was rough.
But it's awful, yeah. And so and I remember those conversations with my wife, which is like, gosh, we've went through all this awful experiences. So what about this are we going to utilize in our future and take it as something that we've learned and we can get better about, or are we going to literally bury that, and plant the flag and say goodbye and see you later? And so I know for me that I was just like, no, we didn't go through all this to not learn from it and be able to do a better job next time. And so, it took us a little while coming back around, but, and even then, starting it, I was doing some joint venture stuff in 2015, 16, 17, or 12, 13, 14.
Right.
And kind of back and forth between real estate and music. And finally met my business partner. And that's when Bridge Turnkey started, 2015.
Gotcha.
So we just kind of rolled into the start of year number 6 as a company. So, and again, it's different when you're like the solo entrepreneur than it is when you're, running a business. Like you were saying, you have all these employees or offices or things, and you end up having different problems, different things as the leader or leading people.
Yeah. And you're right. It would be a pity to put all of those scars to waste. And one thing, obviously, I'm a bit of an outsider. I'm Irish, and one thing I've always admired about American business people is just the tremendous grit and resilience that people have over here. Maybe specifically in the real estate industry, because if you're in real estate kind of 15 plus years, you've been through a ton of knocks, and you've really, people are very, very tough that have been around that long, and I think they are much more likely, Americans are more likely to dust themselves down and build a new business and start again. I think in Europe, we're a little bit more cautious. And if we get that terrible thing happening to us, you're more likely just to get a corporate job or get something safe. Whereas here you have that, I don't know what it is, the frontier mindset, or I'm going to beat this guy. I'm going to stick it up to the man. I'm going to build my own business and I'm going to do it right. I mean, so how did you, sounds like you got a better business partner in 2015. And how did you guys start positioning yourselves to rock and roll with Bridge?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we connected through realestatemingle.com, or otherwise known as Biggerpockets. It's my favorite joke. And, he and I just hit it off. He flew out with his wife and we hung out for a couple days, enjoyed, hanging out. There was this mutual relationship bond. And to this day, man, honestly, it's a God thing, or it's a gift, or a universe thing, or however, whatever your language is around that. It was a gift, man. So my partner and I, still going strong, stronger than ever.
Great.
And doesn't mean that our business is always doing what we want it to. It doesn't mean that we're always making, we make the right decisions. We don't. It doesn't mean we always, have wins or whatever, but it means that we continually and consistently are in alignment with what we're solving, and then being clear on the vision, being clear on the culture, and then being able to say, all right, how can we part the problems out of the way the best we can for our team that's growing. We now have 15, 16 employees.
Brilliant.
And how do we do that? And we start early on, we didn't do that, right? We were all over
just
the place.
winging it, right? You're trying to do
just
more next
winging
quarter than you did the previous quarter.
Yeah, just winging it. And deals don't equal dollars. And I think that's the other thing that's so important. So whether you do 10 deals, I know people in Malibu, California who, literally make $500,000 or $1 million on a single property, right? So I mean, it's just bonkers. We're in the turnkey business. We buy, renovate, and sell houses and put tenants in them and sell them to investors, like you guys do, right? And so we're not making margins like that, but we look at it as a way to get better, more efficient, and volume. And we actually just moved into another market in Tulsa as well, doing new construction in Tulsa as well as Kansas City. So, we can also scale with our opportunity to sell to our buyers and amazing clients that we have. So that's kind of where we've been thinking about.
And so how did you decide? Did you sit down with your business partner and say, okay, we're going to have a meeting about culture and the kind of cultures we want to create? Because number one, you hire people that can do the job. But number two, presumably they have to have a certain personality, certain mindset to build into the culture you define. So how did you, what culture did you define, and how did you go about finding people that would fit into it?
Whew, good question. So I wrote down at first, it was, we knew, I think anybody kind of inherently remembers that boss that had that crummy job and hated how it felt, right? We can all think about, like, we can smell the dish soap or, whatever, pizza or, pet. I was at the pet store this week, buying crickets. I can imagine those for my son's pet toads, it's like, you're the guy that's sticking your hand in there, pulling those crickets out every day, and how much fun that must be. How do you create culture? Well, sometimes you get it right, and sometimes you learn from what you didn't get right. And I think for us, we've always started with, how do we take care of our client, operate with integrity. And, we went through a long season of couple of years in our business. So, the first half of our life, kind of going through more staff people on a team than what we should have probably. And I think it was because we were, all over the place trying to figure out who we were and then what that culture is. And I will say we joined a mastermind, Collective Genius. And then we started working with a business partner, or a business coach rather, who helped us go through that and utilizing traction in EOS, the Entrepreneur's Operating System, and setting that, what are your core values? What is the vision of the company? What is your niche? What is your mission? And quarterly rocks, year goal, 3-year picture, 5-year or 10-year big, hairy, audacious goal. And all of a sudden we're like, oh, and by the way, so Colin, that one of the biggest lessons in this was that core values, which of course are a byproduct of culture, right? It was core values you live through, are represented by the leader, by the visionary. And so, and it's not a selfish thing. It's that you cannot be in core value and in culture if you are not understanding that somebody's culture, somebody's core values has to set the tone for that. And so what we had tried to do early on was say, well, oh, whatever word, it wasn't hustle, but I'll just use that for a really poor example, as a core value, right? Well, that sounds great, but it doesn't actually represent me, Nathan, as my core value. And so, as a question, like, Colin, what is what are two or three people that are most dear to you, and what are things that they do that, uh, are meaningful to you? Well, my grandfather, was a really hard worker. Well, there's, work hard, work ethic, right? So now
Yep.
you can start to come up with those things that produce a list of 20 or 30 items, which then you condense down, and all of a sudden there's your gold. And once we started to finally have those core values and look through the core values, and then work harder and harder and harder. So this is forever going on forever. So I'll shut up now. But it's been an ongoing and is an ongoing.
It sounds like a tremendous amount of work and effort to kind of really distill it into, I don't know what, maybe you've distilled it into like a page or 2 pages, but it sounds like there's a tremendous amount of kind of thought and head scratching going on to define, yes, integrity, hardworking, and all the other stuff that you do. And then once you have it, then I guess you can kind of try and keep your eye out for potential recruits and keep an eye on them after they start to make sure they didn't fool you in the interview.
Well, that's right. And I also, not just fooling you, but you being clear on what it is, right? Because um, ours were actually distilled down to 4 words: leadership, integrity, generosity, and drive. And those were the 4 core values that came out of that experience. And so an example is, hey, Colin, I don't, you really were kind of a jerk on the phone today with a client, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's an example of not using core values. Or you could say, you know, um, generosity is a core value, and today we need to be more generous, Colin, and your responses could be more generous in the way that we approach that relationship, because it is so valuable. And leadership is a core value, and taking that leadership and being able to help solve problems is a core value. So looking through the lens of that, what is it that we can do do a better job next time, and coach through it, right? Because then it's not that personal attack. It's literally saying, are we or are we not in in the core value? And then in the hiring process, you can ask questions around that. Like, how would you approach this phone call?
Mm-hmm.
There's a core value question. And then the other thing that we started using initially was the DISC profile, which is awesome. And we still use it via WiseHire, which is kind of an online platform for jobs. We use WiseHire. It produces a DISC profile, but then we also spend a small fortune a year on predictive index, which is even more dialed in. And so it's been a massive game changer to be able to understand personality of the person, how we think they'll perform. And here's an interesting statistic, by the way, that came out of our learning and training with those guys, that only 12%, the resume is a predictor, only 12% of the success of that applicant.
Wow. So I guess do those things help you find things like, if you're hiring a big picture guy into a role that's a detail oriented personality job? So you're thinking, well, you're not the guy for that. You're the guy that should be managing people or looking for our next market or whatever it might be.
Yes, that's 100% true. As well as, you can utilize the language that shows up in the predictive index and kind of how to communicate to somebody, or how that person thinks and operates. And then you can incorporate that language into the job description, as well as the core values and culture stuff. So, core values are there to repel and attract people, as well as the language that is built around the personality and the person that we want for that job. So, that's why I think we've done a much better job in hiring over the last couple of years, because we've continued to obsess in that way
Mm-hmm.
and get better and better and better about that, hiring process.
That's brilliant. I want to pivot slightly because I think a lot of our listeners are people that are doing those 10, 12 deals a year, which you can kind of do as you're just kind of hustling, you and another guy or you and two other guys. You can just get through that. Can you describe to us the kind of departments or the roles that you've created in a business that does 150 deals a year? You mentioned you kind of 15, 16 people. Are you able to describe briefly what way you have that business structured?
Yeah, for sure. We have a COO that we hired. She's still currently kind of sitting in construction because that's been our biggest area of focus, biggest area of opportunity. But our intention as a company would be she will be kind of hands around the globe, if you will. And then we have an acquisitions department, which has an acquisitions manager, multiple acquisitions agents. We have construction, which will soon have a construction manager and multiple project managers, multiple estimators, uh, administrative staff, and warranty and service tech person. So somebody that's actually swinging a hammer. We have sales and marketing, which is an administrator, sales and marketing director, salesperson, and then client person that helps on
You
that.
have an Irishman in that sales department as well, yeah.
We did. We had that. He decided to move on to another spot, but he's a good dude. And then we have, our, finance, which, my business partner is primarily in there, but eventually we'll have a finance manager as well. So acquisitions, construction, sales and marketing, and transactions really kind of fits now. We originally had it as its separate department, but now it's actually being funneled into the department. So buy side acquisitions, transactions is just a part of that, and then sell side transactions is a part of that, and then finance.
Fascinating. And so talk to us briefly about new construction. What percentage of, quarterly activity is that for you guys now? If you're doing kind of 10, 14 deals a month, how many of those are new build, or is that something that's scaling up and it's a small part, but you're looking for it to be a much bigger part next year?
I just had to do the math because I didn't have that number in my head. Well, I will say with a caveat, just like anything new, and it's literally called new construction, but just a little tiny pivot. And I think this is a great reminder for anybody where you pivot just a tiny bit out of where your lane is and recognizing that the level of learning and stuff it's going to take. So we thought we were going to break ground on our first new construction house in like June of 19.
Yep.
We broke ground on our first new construction house, I think like July of 20 or
Wow.
something like that. April of 20, I don't know, somewhere in that range. So, we were literally a year, give or take, months behind. And so it's one thing for Nathan, the visionary, to say, hey, Colin, go build some houses, man. And the other thing of saying, okay, Nathan, great. There's only 474 details that you're missing here just for today to get up rolling. So all that to say, I think we'll end up in the 20 range or so of houses that we built in 2020, which would represent, it's not a bad first year, right? Represent about 15% of our total portfolio. We do have Tulsa rolling, and it's pretty early, so it's pure speculation, but we have potential to do 30, 40, 50 houses next year in Tulsa. And, there's some other things that are even, not public yet, but, the offensive optimistic goal next year, we could literally put, well over 250 houses on the board and say, 30, 40% of those would be new construction.
It's amazing. And I think people sometimes underestimate just what a pivot that is. I mean, it's one thing to pivot from being a landlord to a wholesaler, or a wholesaler to a flipper, or buying $200,000 over here to buying $250,000 like a mile away. That's a manageable pivot. You can do it with a little bit of planning, but pivoting from buying an old house and fixing it up to building a house, that's couldn't be more different at all. I mean, I don't know how much all the knowledge you accumulated renovating 100 houses. I'm not sure how much use that knowledge is to you, even building a new house.
Well, as a team, we've done 540 houses since 2015. And I will say there's like 6% or something. It's such a different process, and there's different, there's certainly mathematical things that you can underwrite on that deal, but
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's been a lot. And I will say I have a very small part in the success of that, because I, is relying on our team to put it together. And we've had a lot of lessons so far, and a lot of successes, and some giant, problem spots as well. And so we
Yeah.
just work through it. And the beautiful thing is you literally get a brand new house.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for the first year, I certainly believe that you can call it a success. And right now we're really working on the focus of it not just being this other thing, but really fully integrated in and immersed in our actual business. So that's kind of what's kind of on my mind right now.
It sounds super exciting. I mean, but so your main business or your main revenue driver at the minute is the traditional kind of fix and flip, and you've obviously got an awesome acquisitions team and some good crews. And I know a lot of newbies worried about guys like Nathan are getting all the good deals, and there's no good deals left, or the ones are, how does, how do your team find deals in 2020, and how has that evolved over time?
Yeah, for sure. Unlike a lot of our friends, probably mutually, and I don't know what you guys do specifically, but we don't have a huge direct to seller business.
Mm-hmm.
The vast majority of those houses are all wholesalers in MLS, and even to this day, we bought 17, or I'm sorry, we bought 23, but put, I think, 17 of those under contract in October last month. So we bought a bunch. It's one of those things where it's
Mm-hmm.
relationships, and it's being clear on what your buy box is. And you don't have to buy 4 houses a week. You can buy 4 houses a month, or one house a month, or whatever it is, but be really clear on what your buy box is, and that these are the things I'm looking for. This is the size, this is the area, this is the rent, this is the return. So in our Podio, spits those numbers out for us. So in acquisitions, we can put in the address and the financial fundamentals, and it'll spit out a number for us. And you can, you don't need Podio to do that. You could build in a spreadsheet or whatever. But
Sure.
the other nice thing about our Podio system, which is a open architecture, you can put any data point in and track it, and use it, or automate, like ordering of insurance, we automate ordering of title, we automate in our system now. And but that data point as an address can then go to construction and say, okay, well, who's the project manager, and who's the construction contractor, and it can go
Mm-hmm.
to sales, and this is the same property. So anyway, it's like, how do we simplify, but you have to start with the basics, which is, what do I buy, up to what
Yep.
price point,
Mm-hmm.
what area, what's my return, and then making relationships and stating out loud exactly what it is that you're looking for. I think people underestimate what the power of doing the work is. And no, it's not easy. No, it might look from afar that all of a sudden you're an overnight success or whatever, but guess what? There's a grind to it. There's a
Yep.
effort to it. There's some luck to it. And then there's some major tenacity to just keep after, asking for what you want, be prepared to give what you ask for, and you have to keep working until you get it.
I know, and it's no coincidence that the guys that have most of the graft and most of the grit and the determination and put in the hours, they also get most of the luck. They're linked, right?
Yeah, isn't that amazing?
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, and it goes hand in hand, right? And sometimes we get lucky, and sometimes we don't. But when we have something that goes sideways, it's like, all right, what's the lesson? Let's learn from it. Let's not dwell on it. Let's suss out the lesson. Let's make it the least impactful time and everything else, and let's move on to utilize what we can do. And you can't underestimate the quality of leadership, whether it's just yourself, and that could literally be the books you're reading and the inputs and the conversations you're having. And as you hire people, you also, even if it's just administrator or somebody, there's a VA, you still have to have the process. And that's why I said from the beginning, understand your buy box, understand the title company contact, understand how you fund your deals and all that stuff. So then when it comes time to scale, you are already thinking about that and you're already preparing for what that conversation looks like. And then don't forget, it takes time to then train that person on it. And, I did that forever, Colin, where I would be frustrated because I'm like, hey, Colin, welcome to the team. By the way, here's your job. You're the acquisitions guy. Have fun, and then I come back the next day and I'm like, Colin, why didn't you, buy a house? I'm like, well, I don't know. You didn't train me, and I would think it was your fault.
Yeah, they don't have that muscle memory you developed over 100 deals and
Yeah.
700 offers,
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's that patience and persistence with they talk about the reviewing versus the doing, or in this case, it'd be the leading versus the doing and training. And so, now we have a full-blown training program too. Like, how do we onboard this person? What does it look like? What are the tasks? Who's training the tasks? Who's signing off that person knows the tasks? And so literally
So do you have a manual describing each job position in detail and what every task is and who's reporting to who and where they track it? You have all that defined for every position?
I don't know if it's every position, so I don't
Or a
want
lot of them?
but the vast majority, yes, we do.
That's awesome. That's your kind of company Bible. That just makes it so much easier to train people and promote people and put someone else on underneath. That's
And
brilliant. I wish.
consistency, right? Then you understand back to what the job description is and saying, okay, well, what does success look like? Well, now we made it really clear. This is exactly what success looks like, and this is how exactly we can work together to accomplish it.
Mm-hmm. That's brilliant. How about I'm curious. Guys that have built a big business like you, and you're just like dozens of houses on spreadsheets and on Podio. I mean, how much time these days do you spend viewing actual houses that you're renovating, or viewing actual houses that are going to get built? Do you kind of miss that, or do you still personally take a half a day a week or whatever to go and just get your feet dirty and walk around?
I probably should do more of it. But I am not in the vast majority of stuff that we buy. And it's a balance for me trying to be in the middle of seeing what's going on and empowering and leading and setting the example of what we want. And kind of back to that who, not how book. It's like, if I'm down there, then I'm not spending that same time thinking and dreaming about that next market or that leadership problem or whatever it is. So for me, I spend some time on that, but I also really, that's not something that's been in the day-to-day of my life for a couple of years now, honestly.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I get it. And you'd like to have the best of both worlds, but realistically, you can't be the boss of a big business and be, walking through kitchens at the same time. You can't do both. So
Yeah.
pivoting slightly more, Nathan, and this is something I've always struggled with a lot, is dedicating too much time to flipping houses and not enough time to building my own personal portfolio. How have you balanced that over the years?
That's a great question, and I've struggled with that a little bit myself too. And between early on, just having so many ideas and not being focused, I think that was one of the issues. And number
Mm-hmm.
two was, as we scaled and got better at doing stuff, what was the number percentage that we added? So over the last year, let me think, maybe year or two,
Mm-hmm.
we started working closely with our accountant and then saying, all right, right now, what we're going to do is we're going to buy and hold in the same amount quantity wise that gives us the best tax benefit, but isn't going overboard and taking out that active income. And so, we'd sold off a bunch of different stuff that we'd bought, early on together, and we kind of recalibrated in that way, and have just started to be more proactive on saying, okay, for the quarter, for the year, for whatever. And so, my partner and I go back and forth on this, but I've put a new target on the wall that I want to have 500 doors in 5 years, and
Wow.
we'd have it in a few different markets. And I think at the end of next year, we'd probably be sitting somewhere between 100 and 120, give or take, and scaling that way. So we're making it now. It's a massive priority, and it's on
And
the
these are
board.
mostly single family homes that you own with your business partner?
That's correct. Yep.
Yeah, that's
Exactly.
amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and let's jam on that for just one more second too, because
Yeah.
if you don't mind, because I think a lot of times people become really obsessed with the cash flow portion of this, and
Hmm.
they miss a lot of the other stuff. So what I was talking about is depreciation, advanced depreciation, so you can write off a lot more of your active income that way. Number two is that wealth creation, and that Bridge Turnkey, my company, our amazing team, our mission is building a bridge to wealth and freedom through real estate. And the wealth portion doesn't really happen in the beginning. It takes time. And so when you look at that, and if you haven't before, go look at an amortization chart and start looking and check this math out. I can't remember if it's 20 or 25-year AM right now, but amortization, I think it's 20. But if you do 20-year AM, and you have roughly 4% or whatever the interest rate is right now, you're paying 3% a year down of principal. So you're gaining 3% equity. So if you think about it, if you're in it at 80% when you purchase it, in 5 years you're at 65%.
Yeah.
And you do that over 10 or 20 houses, we are literally talking about building your multi-million dollar real estate empire that way. And so, it is cash flow, it is appreciation, it is depreciation, it is the paying down of that principal. And so that's an amazing tool to think about it, and not just in the cash flow.
You're right. And real estate has tremendous benefits that other asset classes don't have. If you're fortunate enough to maybe earn $100,000 a year in, net operating income from your rentals, I guarantee you're paying way less tax than some guy working for a multinational company earning $100,000 a year. The tax benefits are incredible because of those things you said, the depreciation, the tax write-offs, the mortgage interest relief, everything.
No question about it.
And getting a good accountant is kind of key to that whole thing. I think we had a similar situation. Maybe we even have the same accountant. I don't know, but isn't my guy's name is Marcus.
Mine
But
is as well.
there you go. And they tell you, look, if you get an extra X amount of doors before December 31st, I'm going to be able to save you Y dollars in your 2019 tax returns. And that might be a significant amount of money that would make you get over, okay, well, I'm not selling it to the investor now. Now that you've put it in black and white very clearly, I'm buying it and I'm keeping it. So it's, yeah, that's
Exactly.
impressive. So let me think, I want to wind down now because I know you have a ton of stuff. So let me just kind of finish up briefly. Well, maybe two more questions. What are the big mistakes that you would advise people to avoid making? People that are starting to accumulate properties as rentals, or people that want to get into it as a business, flipping, wholesaling? What are the major red flags to avoid?
Oh man.
I know there's
uh,
books on this stuff, but I mean, there must be one or two things that
I
stick out.
Yeah, I think there's one thing that I would say. A lot of times people come into the business and they see all these different things that people do, and just like you and I have talked about, right? I have a pretty good sized team, and we do new construction, we do renovation properties. We have a really big meetup as well here locally, and it's one of those things where you can get obsessed about all these different things, and wholesaling, and new construction, and flipping, and rentals, and whatever. And
Yep.
all of those things are wonderful, but you need to make one a priority. And
Mm-hmm.
I was just having a conversation with a chiropractor buddy who's a super visionary dude, smart dude, veteran, stud, amateur fighter. He is an amazing man, and he always has new ideas, just like I do, sitting in that visionary seat, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I told him, I'm like, and this is like straight out of the mouth of my business coach, who's like, Nathan, I'm not going to use his name, just, but hey, Doc, you have not earned the right to go do that next thing until you have somebody else who is responsible in doing the thing that you're doing right now. And so, don't get wildly, which is again, I'm speaking to myself because, for years we did this where we had Airbnbs and we had, flipping and wholesale and
Yeah.
and man, it's not necessarily as sexy to think about, or, you're boosting your own ego of what you are or what you aren't, but keep it simple, make it so simple, uh, make it so clear, make the end result so clear that when you go to bed at night and you wake up in the morning, you're thinking about it. And then make a huge goal. Just drives me absolutely crazy when, whatever that is, make a huge goal that makes it worth getting out of bed for and getting after it.
Yeah. I agree. You need to be very focused, I made all those mistakes. I started out promoting real estate literally all over the world, and then I started promoting real estate all over Florida and into Charlotte and Atlanta, and I didn't really become successful at all until I literally started buying a ton of properties in a 12-mile by 2-mile box in the northwest corner of Tampa. That's when I figured it out. That's when I got it. I'm like, you got to get this repeat, unbelievably boring because you're buying literally the same house 50,
Yep.
60, 100 times. But
Yep.
that's how you become really good at it. You don't become really good at selling houses in 5 cities or 5 countries. Forget about it. But you can become an expert in a couple of zip codes and take it from there, expand from there afterwards.
Absolutely.
But
And I know somebody who has one of the largest wholesale businesses in the world, and they did like some ungodly, like 5 or 6 digit, number of deals in the real estate business as a wholesaler. But the fact is they didn't start that way, right? They started in one city and then they grew that and they understood how to do it. And then, so if you want to have a huge business, great, go build it, but just start it with that clarity and vision. And then, like we talked about, the training, what is the process, and how do you onboard those people? How do you onboard a new market? Who's leading that market, and on and on and on. We can, go down that rabbit hole.
yeah, we could, but we won't. But I've often found as well, my kind of last question is, if you want to be a leader and you want to have all the ideas and you want to think clearly, you often, you can't be just all work and no play. You need to get yourself out of the business, and you need to have some interesting hobbies. What are your hobbies? What do you do for fun and inspiration?
Well, I haven't been training the last couple of months with the COVID situation, but I was training for multiple years in mixed martial arts, and I actually took a cage fight in
Wow.
February of this year. And so that was one. I have 11-acre property, and so I love hunting. I have a tractor, running around, running the chainsaw, having a bonfire. Um, and so I just was in Colorado elk hunting, and literally out this morning turkey hunting with the bow, and so
Okay.
just enjoying. My son and I fish, all summer and fall, and so we just enjoy doing all kinds of different stuff, playing music. So yeah, I keep busy with that, and I agree. You have to have stuff that you enjoy and focus on outside of work, and that way when you get back in work, you're focused and fired up about what you're working on.
Yeah, right on, right on. Well, this has been a lot of fun, Nathan. I really appreciate it. Where can our listeners go if they'd like to find out more about you?
Absolutely. So I'll give you a couple. I'm on the Insta, Nathan Brooks REI. Starting to get a few folks on there, so that's cool. I'm on Facebook as well. Just Google Nathan Brooks,
Hmm.
and then our company as well. You can follow it on the Insta. I believe it's Bridge Turnkey, just as it sounds, and the same on Facebook. So, and if people are trying to check out actually our actual properties, is bridgeturnkey.com.
Awesome. I will put all those on the show notes. Nathan, thanks again, and hope to see you again sometime soon.
Likewise, brother. Thank you so much.
There you go, folks. That was show 25 with Nathan Brooks, and what an interesting conversation it was. What an interesting guy he is, and just look how much he's achieved in the last 5 years. He got his ass kicked in during the Great Recession, dusted himself down, and set up and built a thriving business, which is making serious inroads into the new construction space. So let's watch how he goes in the next 4 or 5 years. And we also didn't talk about it, but he's also set up a huge real estate meetup in the Kansas market. It's one of the biggest meetups in Kansas, and he regularly, or used to before COVID, attracted hundreds and hundreds of people, and he actually finds a lot of his deals that way through the meetup as well. So he's got a lot of different skill sets, and you can tell he's a very introspective guy, and he takes his leadership of the company very seriously, the training of his team and his people very seriously. And yeah, he's very purposeful, I think, in everything he does. And I love the way his advice on how to get started was to start small, start in a small area and expand from there. Don't try and be a jack of all trades to try and do, mobile homes, single family homes, apartments, fix and flips, auctions, wholesaling. I mean, if you try and do everything in the first 2 years, you'll get very little accomplished. I think he's absolutely spot on when he says pick a niche, pick a property type, price type, neighborhood type, location, and just communicate that criteria very, very clearly to wholesalers. Have your MLS searches set up for that very, very clearly. You can train a VA to keep an eye out for those properties on auction websites as well. So once you have your criteria pretty well narrowed down, you can get good at that. You can get your first deal, 5th deal, 10th deal pretty quickly. And once you've mastered it, and more importantly, train somebody else to do it, because it's a real pity to let that skill go to waste. If you have mastered a skill in a certain neighborhood, it's good to keep it. Train someone else to do it if you want to do something else. If you want to look at new neighborhoods or new markets or new property types, make the use of the skills you've developed, but get good at the first thing before you start doing at the second thing. That was one of the key takeaways from today's show. And the other one, of course, is picking the right kinds of business partners and picking the right types of personalities to run your business, and just to think very carefully about your core values and how to find those in others as well, and kind of grow together because of it. That was a pretty powerful message, and certainly can get you through a lot of ups and downs if you all share the same values. So that was very useful as well. So yeah, good show. I thought very good show. Enjoyed talking to Nathan, always do. And I appreciate your guys' support as always. If you are getting some value out of these episodes, please do let me know personally with a quick note. I always enjoy seeing those. Or give me a rating or a review on Apple Store or Play Store, whatever it might be. Or better still, share it on social media with your friends if you think they might get some good value out of it too. And don't forget to have a quick look at the website, colinvestments.com. You can reach out to me there. You'll find me on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all the usual places. I'm not the most sophisticated guy in the world when it comes to social media, but I am on it. I do check it. I'm going to get better at posting. I posted some before and after photos from a house I renovated recently as well. So I'm getting there, guys. And thanks for tuning in. And I think that's pretty much it for me today. I'll be back soon with show 26. But until then, this is Colin G. Murphy signing out. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.